Hello everyone and welcome to episode 100 of the Dyslexia Life Hack Show. I started this podcast way back in the 16th of June 2021 and released episodes every 2 weeks, and here we are at episode 100. I want to thank anybody who's been with us since episode 1. And in this episode I have a great guest, Michelle Catterson. She is the Executive Head Teacher of Moon Hall School, Reigate, and Chairperson of the Board at the British Dyslexia Association. Moon Hall School is a mainstream dyslexia specialist school and provides an environment for dyslexic children to thrive and take full advantage of their intellects and talents. As always, I'll put extended show notes at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Thank you for having me. It's a delight to be here.
Excellent. Really enjoying talking to you. You have been involved in some very interesting stuff, but where I want to start with is, where did your interest and spark in teaching come from?
Oh gosh, so I did my degree in biology, and I had the option of doing a year in industry as part of the degree. So I worked for a year doing research and development and worked for a great company, great people, but I found it so boring. And that's no disrespect to any scientists out there, but it just wasn't for me. So I applied to do my PGCE teacher training whilst I was doing my year in industry. And I got in. I was quite surprised to get in because it was super competitive at that point in time, especially where I wanted to go and do my postgrad. So yeah, just took it as a sign that that was what I was meant to do. And that was 23 years ago.
It's an interesting one. You do your degree into your teens and early 20s, so you sort of get part way through and think, I may have made the wrong life path here in terms of my education.
Yeah, I know. Do you know what? I still love science, and actually my degree was microbiology and immunology, and when I was head teacher during the whole COVID times, it kind of really helped. So it still was very useful, and I still teach science to this day, even though I'm head teacher and busy, and I still am in the classroom. So I don't dislike science. I'm very passionate about it. It's such a great subject, but yeah, just not being a scientist, it wasn't for me.
Fair enough. So you obviously pivoted to teaching, and has it always been sort of secondary school teaching, or did you jump into primary once you sort of started going?
So my postgrad qualification was in secondary education, and that was always where I thought I wanted to be. But actually, for 7 years, I taught in a prep school. So I taught children right from year 3 all the way up to year 8. And initially, I found that quite challenging because I'd literally went from teaching A level in a sixth form to teaching these tiny little kids. And I was a mum, and I had kids my own kids were similar age. So I'm not used to little kids. But it's a whole different scenario when you've got 20 of them sat in front of you in a classroom trying to do science. So yeah, I've taught all age groups, and yeah, now I'm at Moon Hall, and it's quite different as well. We start in year 3, which is age 7, and we go all the way up to year 11, which is age 16. So I've got the whole range of students at my school now, which is great. It's perfect. Love it that way.
Yes, definitely, and It's interesting, isn't it, how you got a whole range of students under one school. So before we dive into Moon Hall, I'd like to really go back to when you first started having an awareness of dyslexia and neurodiversity. What sort of point in time was it during your teaching career, or when you were younger, you noticed kids were doing different things, that you started to think, hang on, there are kids that learn differently here?
Yeah, so I think I'm in my early 40s. I don't mind sharing that.
Good age to be.
It's a good age. It's definitely a good age. But when we think back, people of our age and generation, to those kids in the classroom who were dyslexic, and they were labelled as the naughty kids, the lazy kids. And I saw that, and my best friend at school was dyslexic and really, really struggled with typical learning in the classroom. And I mean, severely dyslexic, in that even telling the time was a struggle, or knowing what lesson was next on the timetable. But verbally, super intelligent, could research something and remember facts that I would never be able to do myself. So I think I've always had that connection with like a friend who's had special educational needs. And in every school that I've taught in, whether that's been in Scotland or down here in England, I've always worked in the learning support departments, or I've always supported children with SEN. I've always been drawn to that, and it's been very much a passion of mine throughout the whole of my teaching career.
Yeah, definitely. So, of course, obviously the accent gives away you're Scottish, and you've got experience of both Scottish and English education systems. How did you find being an SEN teacher in both systems?
So do you know the main difference from just teaching in a school, so not even SEN, in Scotland, the maximum class size that you can have is 20. And often you're not teaching 20, and that's in a state school. So that's your typical comprehensive school. You're not allowed to have more than 20 in the class. So ordinarily, I would have maybe about 17, 18 kids in the class. And then we relocated to England, and I was teaching science to a group of 34 year 8 students. Yeah, I know. Like, I really take my hat off to those teachers that have that number of children within a classroom setting. It is challenging, and it's really tough as well when you have a practical based subject like science. And I really felt that it was difficult for me to be able to have that impact in the classroom that I wanted to have, that I was used to having when I was a teacher in Scotland. So that's the main contrast that I can see from the sort of English system versus the Scottish system. In terms of SEN support, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because I kind of reflect on what I knew then versus what I'm experiencing now. And I would say there's a lot of parity between England and Scotland in that generally children with special educational needs are being failed. They're not having their needs met. And that's through no fault of the school and the class teacher. I think it comes from higher up than that, where there's just a lack of funding and resources available. So I would say for an SEN child, whether they're being taught in Scotland or England, there's actually not a huge amount of difference. It's not great north and south of the border.
Yes, and I understand what you mean with, particularly in science class. I remember, science was always my safe haven when I was at school because I was reasonably good at it. But I do remember it being quite an unruly class with people doing interesting things with Bunsen burners and spread across the classroom. There'd be 3 different experiments going on where I'm sure the teacher only intended for one to happen.
Yeah, I know people say it and it's a bit of a cliche term, but it is a little bit of crowd control when you have that number of students. The intention that you have at the beginning of the lesson and the lesson plan that you might have set out might not be what ends up teaching and being taught in the classroom. But it's a tricky profession being a teacher, and you wear many hats all at the one time. But yeah, teaching 34 year 8 kids was really difficult.
Yes, I can imagine it was. So did you branch, we talked about science teaching, did you branch into other subjects as well, or have you mainly focused on science throughout your sort of teaching career?
So this is another difference between Scotland and England. So when you are teaching a subject in Scotland, you have to have studied it to degree level in order to be able to teach it.
Yes, you do, yeah.
Yeah, so in my 3rd year, when I was, I did the microbiology and immunology. So even though I'd done some maths in my 1st year at uni and I had done some chemistry as well, you're not allowed to be a teacher of those subjects in Scotland. I was, when I first came down to England and I was teaching in the prep school, I taught science, and because I'd studied maths at university level, I could teach maths in the classrooms down here. So that's a bit of a difference as well in terms of like what you're able to teach as a teacher and based on your own learning experiences.
Yeah. So what was your pathway to finding your way to Moonhill School? You obviously have gone through various education places in north and south of the border to England and Scotland. And how did you walk down the pathway and end up attracted to this school, as it was not a huge entity at the time?
Yeah, I saw the job advertised. I had been, so at that point in time, I was head of department and I had a pastoral role as well within the school. And I'd been at that school as head of science for about 5 years. And I was just sort of ready to take that next step into senior leadership. I was really keen to start that journey and saw the job advertised at Moonhall. It's very different to other schools. It's not your typical school. And like I said, I've always been interested in working with children with dyslexia and special educational needs. So yeah, it just really intrigued me. There aren't many dyslexia specialist schools out there. There are lots of SEN schools out there that might focus on autism, for example, or SEMH. But in terms of one that specifically focuses on dyslexia and how to support dyslexic kids with their learning, it was just really intriguing to me. So that's why I applied and got the job, started as deputy head, and then within a year got promoted to the head teacher position.
Oh, wow. It didn't take long.
No, it wasn't. And look, I'll be honest, because I don't mind sharing this, because sometimes sharing part of your journey helps other people as well. But when I started at Moonhall, I wasn't sure if it was the school for me. There was a lot of things at the school that just weren't functioning the way that I thought they should do. It wasn't really what I anticipated it to be. We had quick successions of head teachers, lots of changeovers with the senior leadership team. And I questioned whether or not that's where I wanted to kind of establish myself as a senior leader. I pushed through, and it's worked out well for me, but it's definitely been for a bit of a love of the situation and wanting to make sure that the school is there for the kids, because there's been times where things have been challenging and been difficult, and it's the kids, and knowing that schools like Moonhall have to continue to exist, that's really pushed me through when there were challenges with leadership and inspections and different things like that.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. And you obviously, now you are the head. You have a quite good control on the direction of it now, and able to kind of pull it in the direction you would like, along with the rest of the team.
That is the nice thing about being in leadership, where you have the autonomy to steer the ship in the direction that you would like it to. But I know as well from talking to other head teachers that that's not always the case. You have to have a really supported governing body that are going to support you and appreciate the risks that you're prepared to take to try new things and see if it works. So I'm very fortunate to have a really strong governing body as well that trusts me to make those decisions, and mistakes sometimes as well. So it's the nice part of leadership, is being able to be part of the decision-making process.
Yes. And that's a very good point, actually, about telling everybody how the system works around you. You are the head teacher, but there's the governing body that you have to be part of and work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, my governors are my bosses, and I have to answer to them, and I'm accountable to them. And thankfully, I have a really good, supportive board of governors. There's a definite balance between the support and challenge, which is needed, and that critical friend of being a good governor is there. And I'm really fortunate to have governors that are very skilled in certain areas and bring a lot to the school. They're very committed to the school. But I do know lots of head teachers that the relationship between the head teacher and the chair of governors can sometimes break down, or there can be a clash of personalities, and that really doesn't work well for the school, because you have to have that chair of governors and the head teacher working well together in the best interests and making the decisions in the best interests of the school. So when the relationship does break down or doesn't gel the way that it should, I've known head teachers that have had to leave their roles because they haven't been able to get on with the chair of governors, and vice versa. The chair of governors may be having to step down if they've not been able to work well with the head teacher. So it's quite a fragile relationship, because on one hand, you're wanting to build up trust and confide in one another without fear of judgment. But then at the same time, if the head teacher isn't doing something they should be doing, then it's the chair of governor's responsibility to have that conversation with the head teacher. So it's definitely a tricky one to keep in check and have the right balance in place. But like I said, I'm very fortunate to have the board that I do and the governors that I do supporting the school.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think, like any job, isn't it, having people around you that are supportive helps you personally thrive and deliver better on the job.
Yeah, you've got to build your team, haven't you? And your governors are part of that team at the school. So yes, you've got your senior leadership team, the ones that are closest around about you, and you expect them to all step up and to play their part in the day-to-day operational running of the school. But you need the board to be aligned with the strategy and the vision for the school as well, because there's no point. I'm very ambitious for the school. I really want to try new things and to see if it works, and to not be afraid of trying those new things. But if I had a board that were really, really risk averse, then that wouldn't work very well. So it's definitely that sort of fluid balance that you have to maintain throughout to make sure that the school is thriving in the way that it should be.
Yeah, most definitely. So if anybody's listening that's unfamiliar what the school does, can you do your kind of, your elevator pitch for what the school does?
So basically, we are a small school of 200 students in Surrey, and every single student at my school has a diagnosis of dyslexia. But many of my students also have co-occurring difficulties as well. So our next most common co-occurring difficulty is ADHD. We also have some children who are on the autistic spectrum. We have dyspraxia, dyscalculia. We have some children with visual stress and who experience sensory overload as well. And we get amazing results for the students that we have. The value added by coming to Moon Hall, where you are taught by expert teachers who have additional qualifications, is phenomenal. So we do CAT testing, cognitive ability testing for our students when they first arrive at the school. And the average grade increase is 1.2 per GCSE subject for the students when they get to the end of their GCSEs. Our English pass rate is above national levels, our maths pass rate is above national levels, and so is our overall pass rate at GCSEs. And that is testament to the staff that we have working at the school that all have an understanding and training in special educational needs and know how to adapt their resources and the way that they teach in order to help the students.
Yes. It sounds like a really great place to be, and I'm slightly envious that I never went. But how did it all start? Where did the idea come from?
So no, it's like a script from a Hollywood movie, and that's not really an exaggeration at all. It started by our founders, Mr. and Mrs. Baker. Berry Baker adopted two children. One of the children were severely dyslexic and couldn't access learning at school. So she homeschooled, and she was a teacher. She is a teacher, and she taught her son at home around the kitchen table, which the name of their house was called Moon Hall.
Ah, right.
So that's where that comes from. And then parents just started asking Berry, like, oh, my son's dyslexic too, my daughter's dyslexic, they can't learn in the classroom, what shall I do? And Berry literally set up a homeschool in her house. And they then ended up with too many children that wanted to come and get the support and the help that Berry was providing. So they fundraised and they built a school on the site of another school with a long-term lease. And then the kids went through that provision right up to year 6, and the parents went, yeah, this is great, but what next? Like, we don't want this to stop. So then they fundraised again, and they bought Moon Hall School, which is the school that we're all based on the site of now, in just outside Reigate in Surrey. And yeah, that went right up to 16, and the children can have an all-through education. We no longer have the two sites. We sold the original school to the school that we had the lease with, and brought everything onto site at Moon Hall Reigate. So we have children right from year 3 to year 11 on the school site now, which is just fantastic.
And how does a typical day at the school differ compared to a typical day at a more sort of conventional school that has people that from all different learning types?
So I think if you were to come visit my school, what you would notice that's different is the classrooms are definitely different. So we have no more than 12 in a classroom, and we have our own in-house therapy team. So we have our own occupational therapists, our own speech and language therapists, and they very much work in collaboration with our teachers and our teaching assistants. So it's not unusual to see children using OT equipment within the classroom. So there's lots of standing desks. There might be children sitting on wobble cushions. There may be children sitting on the inflatable gym balls. There might be children with their shoes off with elastic bands that are tied around the feet of the legs of the chair, and they're tapping their feet against that for some sensory stimulation. The day is quite a long day. We start at 8:20 and we finish at 4 o'clock, but we chunk the day. So you have 2 lessons and then a break, 2 lessons, then lunch, 2 lessons, then home. And it's not unusual as well to see kids having movement breaks around the school. So when it gets a little bit too much for them, if they can't concentrate, if they're processing a little bit too much at one point in time, they'll go for a walk around the school. You might see kids doing exercises to try and get rid of some of that energy as well, so that they can focus within the lessons. Fidget toys are everywhere within the classrooms, on the desks. We are so child focused, so child centered. We as teachers change the way that we do things to make sure that the children can access the learning. And I think that's one of the big differences, because we have that luxury of smaller class sizes and all the resources on hand that we need. It means that we can really bespoke and individualize things for the students. Assistive technology is a huge thing for us as well, because we don't want any students to be relying upon an adult in order to access the learning. So we, right from year 3, the littlest kids in the school are learning how to touch type. They have timetabled assistive technology lessons every week. They will learn how to use speech-to-text software. They'll learn how to dictate. We use a lot of artificial intelligence as well to help the children to be as independent as they possibly can. And that's just so important. The older that a dyslexic child or any child with special education needs gets, the less they want to appear as different, the less they want to appear compared to their peers as not being able to do things. So the fact that all of our students have their own touchscreen laptops means that they can just pop the headset on, they can use whatever programs they like, their desktop is set up how they like it in order to access the learning from the lessons. For example, in my science class, everything I do is put on Teams. So any PowerPoints that I use, any resources that I use is all on Teams. I share everything with the students. They can pre-learn it if they want before they come to the lesson, or even after the lesson if they want to go over things again, then it's all there for them. Assignments are set. So if I give them a task to do in class, we don't give out worksheets. I don't give them a worksheet just to figure out and work through. It's set as an assignment on Teams, so they can use immersive reader and speech software to read what it is that they need to do, and they can get on with things. And that sort of fostering of independence and promotion of independence is really key to helping them to be successful, not just at Moon Hall, but outside of the school as well.
Yes, definitely. There's a lot going on, and having over 200 people there, I read somewhere in your bio, it started off as 85 when you joined, and you've managed to grow it. So what did you do to grow it through and keep the classroom size down, as well as applying all the assistive technology and other ways of accessing it?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of alluded to that a little bit at the start, that it's not always been this gold star shining example of special education needs. It really had a bit of a tricky history. And for me, when I took on the post as head teacher, it was about stability and it was about credibility. And when I was the deputy head at Moon Hall, I could absolutely see as soon as I walked in the door that it was nurturing, it was kind, it was caring. And we were looking after children that had a really quite horrendous time of education before they'd arrived at Moon Hall. And that is so important. But what's equally important, and which maybe was lacking a little bit, was the aspirational academic side of things, where we want the children to be able to perform to their absolute potential. So a lot of emphasis was placed on the academic side of things and looking at our curriculum and our learning and teaching and creating consistency across the school. We stayed very much true to our admissions criteria. So I know from talking to a lot of parents, there's a real lack of SEN provision generally, particularly around SEMH and autism as well. Parents trying to find the right child that can meet the right school that can meet their child's needs. But for us, we know that we're experts in dealing with dyslexic kids and teaching dyslexic kids, so we stuck really true to that. And I think that's quite important. It can be very tempting when you don't have full capacity at the school and maximum pupil numbers to widen what your offer is, what your core offer is. And there were times where we had 85 at the school and I'm thinking, right, should we open it out to other SEN needs? But I don't think that works well in the long run, because those children who are dyslexic and need an environment that really caters to dyslexic children, they just need certain things that are different from other children's needs. For example, autism or the SEMH or whatever it might be, speech and language difficulties. I think it's quite important not to just end up a generalised SEN school and know what your strengths are and what you're able to support well with.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's really good that you're able to stick to being a specialist in dyslexia. I mean, it must be an interesting classroom where everybody is of the same neurodiversity. It must be some interesting conversation and personalities go around.
Yeah, I think, but you know what? It is so empowering for the kids. the kids, if I stop them, I mean, in fact, we've got open day tomorrow, and we've got another open day on Thursday as well, and the kids do the tours and they speak to the parents, and 99.9% of the time when they're asked, what do you like about Moon Hall, they will say, I don't feel different anymore. They've come from an environment where they're the only dyslexic kid in the class, or one of the only dyslexic kids in the class. They're the ones that maybe struggled to read, didn't get good marks on the spelling test, and different things like that. So they've been completely misunderstood prior to coming to Moon Hall. And all children, because we start at year 3, they've all had an alternative experience of education. So they've all known what that's felt like to be the only dyslexic kid. So it's very empowering for them to come to a school where that stigma of being dyslexic no longer exists. It doesn't matter that you can't spell really well, although I've got some kids that are amazing spellers. It doesn't matter that you might struggle with some reading. It doesn't matter that your organisational skills aren't great, or you've forgotten what the next lesson is, or that you can't tell the time to know what point in the day you're at. There's no stigma. We do not challenge children. If they need to know what's next on their timetable, we tell them what's next on their timetable. There's no sort of questioning them around that, and sort of challenging them, why don't you know what's next on your timetable, which they would have gotten perhaps other settings, or quite often, especially with our kids that have got ADHD, they're seen as the kids that can't focus, can't sit still, they're a little bit lazy. And this is all these horrible words that they hear or perceive themselves to be. So when they come to Moon Hall, I mean, I've had kids doing press-ups in my lessons because they've said, Miss, I'm just like, I've got too much energy. And I've said, right, fine, what do you want to do? Can I just do 10 press-ups? Crack on you do it. Let's get some press-ups done. I've had kids that with the classrooms right next to the sports field, and they've just not been able to focus, and it's been after lunchtime, they've probably had a bit of a sugar rush or whatever, and they just said, can I just go do a lap of the pitch? Absolutely, on you go. And then they come back in and I say, do you feel a little bit better? Yeah, I feel much better now. And they sit down and they focus. So that sort of been able to adapt the way that we do things for kids that would have been told previously, especially, I mean, parents that have got children with special educational needs, they've all sat in those parents' evenings and heard the teacher say they're always looking out the window, they can't concentrate, they never sit still. I genuinely believe that that's down to their needs not being met effectively within the classroom. So when their needs are met within the classroom, you see a whole different child in front of you.
Yes, definitely. And it is really interesting hearing some of your examples with like kids staring out the window but doing some press ups or running around the field would be such a quick and easy thing to allow the child to do to calm back down again.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we also undervalue daydreaming as well. Like, right, okay, kids don't daydream because they're not interested. I mean, sometimes they might, but they daydream because their mind is going off on a little journey. And I think sometimes when we daydream as adults, that's when you really find those magical sort of eureka moments, and not allowing a child that opportunity to be creative in their thoughts and to try different pathways and different avenues is difficult, I know, because we're really restricted and restrained with the curriculum that we've got to deliver. But I think just allowing children to have those creative moments is quite important.
Yes. Yeah, most definitely. And I think, obviously, with the bigger schools and the bigger 40 class size or 35 class size, if somebody starts doing press-ups or daydreaming, then it might encourage others just and all that kind of stuff. So there is the problem with the class size that you don't have. But you are totally right. And I do it at work. Like, if I'm struggling to come up with a solution for something, I will go for a walk or go somewhere else and come back and, that's what I should be doing. And you sort of end up putting a timer on your desk so you don't spend like 3 hours spinning the same thing round and round and round trying to work out how to solve it.
Yeah, and I completely appreciate that we're in a very fortunate position that we can do things a little bit differently. And I completely appreciate all those teachers that are absolutely trying their best. There's no teacher that goes into the profession that doesn't want to make a difference, that doesn't want to have an impact on a child's life. We all go into the teaching profession with the best of intentions. And I know for many, many teachers, I was a governor in a state school. My children have had a mixture of state and independent school. So I'm a big fan of a state school education. But I know for many teachers, there's a lot of frustration there because they want to do so much more. They want to be able to help so much more. And it's very challenging when you don't have the ability to adapt your lessons or the way that they teach because of the number of kids in the class, because of the number of needs that are increasing within the class, because behaviour might be an issue as well. I've yet to meet a teacher that doesn't care. I've yet to meet a teacher that doesn't want to help. And it's just such a shame that there's so many teachers that are contemplating leaving the profession because they're not feeling fulfilled in their role and not able to have the impact that they went into teaching for in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. It must be really hard when you care quite a lot, but you can't get what you feel is needed to be done.
Yeah, it's really, even I would say, even at Moon Hall, at a place where we have so many resources and so many expert teachers, it's still a challenge. In my year 11 class that I teach, they've all got ADHD as a co-occurring difficulty. So they're all dyslexic, ADHD, and some of them, they're 15, 16 years old, and some of them have a reading age of 5 and 6. And that's really, really hard. I can help them as much as I possibly can. We can train them how to use assistive technology and artificial intelligence to try and level that playing field as best as we possibly can. But the reality is that life outside of Moon Hall isn't always that accommodating. And when they go into college or they find a job, or the stigma that they might have experienced prior to coming to our school starts to resurface again. And I still feel, and maybe the day when I don't feel like this is the day that I shouldn't be a teacher anymore, but I still feel that there's more that I could be doing. There's more help that I could be giving some of the children. There's just not enough hours in the day, unfortunately, to have the impact that we all want to. But I think, yeah, we absolutely try our best. Do we get it right all of the time? No, but we're trying our absolute best to make sure that we help as many kids as possible.
Yes, brilliant. And talking about expanding how you help people, you're also chairperson of the BDA. So how did you get how did you get into being on the board of the BDA?
So I was a school governor for 4 years, and I absolutely loved sitting on the other side of the table, if you like. It really helped me in my role as a head teacher, because the head teacher at that school was absolutely amazing, and I learned a lot of things from her and listening to another head teacher. So that was a really worthwhile experience for me, and it kind of made me think about getting involved with charities and what else could I do, which had a sort of governance trustee sort of role as well. So I applied to be trustee at the British Dyslexia Association and was successful, and quite quickly was appointed to the head of their education committee that they had, and then I was vice chair, and took on the post as chair after a couple of years. I think what I'm learning is just don't stand still for too long, because somebody's going to give you a job to do. It was the same when I was deputy head teacher, but I love working with the British Dyslexia Association. They're the UK's leading charity in supporting dyslexic individuals, not just children, but adults as well, because we often forget about dyslexia in the workplace and how that presents. And being part of the British Dyslexia Association, what it enables me to do is I am very fortunate that I have connections with ministers and House of Lords representatives as well. So I know that the children that come to Moon Hall are fortunate, and they are the ones whose needs are being met, and they're no longer misunderstood. But there are so many children across the UK that are sat in classrooms misunderstood and not having their needs met. So the legislative change side of things is really, really important for me, to make sure that as many children as possible with dyslexia are getting the help that they need.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And that's how you're finding that, kind of talking with ministers and trying to. Do you use Moon Hall as an example, like we need more of this, or how do you kind of broach that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I always try and make sure that the hats that I wear are very separate. So when I'm head teacher of Moon Hall, I'm most definitely speaking on behalf of what I do as head teacher at Moon Hall. Equally though, if I'm speaking on behalf of the BDA, I'm speaking about what we do at the BDA, and I try not mix those two roles up. Although it is important, having had that sort of lived experience of working with individuals with dyslexia and their families, that it's really important to make sure that I'm using that experience and understanding to give ministers examples. So I used to work very closely with an MP that was on the Education Select Committee, and quite often when he would have a question in Parliament or there was an Education Select Committee meeting coming up, he would phone me and he would say, right, Michelle, tell me what it's like. It was during COVID, and what's it like in a school right now? And that was fantastic from an MP, not to just have their own perception of things and bring that to the table, but to actually speak to head teachers. And he was speaking to other head teachers as well. And I found that really purposeful, given that insight and experience to ministers. And Lord Addington is our president of the British Dyslexia Association, so we work very closely with Lord Addington, who is dyslexic himself. So he's had that lived experience of being a dyslexic individual and has supported the BDA for a number of years, many years. And I think he brings a lot of advocacy to the House of Lords as well.
Yes. And it's great that you've got ministers that are getting involved and want to understand it rather than focusing on other things as well. But so how do you find the BDA feels it fits in with the kind of modern world of lots of people online and social media pushing dyslexia and other neurodiversities?
Yeah, so I mean, I think in terms of the number of individuals that we help and support, we have a free helpline at the British Dyslexia Association, so anybody can phone that helpline, whether it be a parent or a young person with dyslexia or even someone in the workplace. I think that's much needed. We'd love to do a lot more with our helpline, but it's run by volunteers and there's only so much goodwill that you can ask of the volunteers. The BDA is kind of split in the sense that it also does lots of training. So training for schools, training for teachers, educating individuals. They're also the secretariat for the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Dyslexia. So they have direct conversations with ministers involved in Parliament with education, so they can influence and help support with that side of things as well. And they also do workplace training. So often you find that people with dyslexia aren't diagnosed till much later on. I think the statistic is that around 80% of dyslexic children leave school not knowing that they're dyslexic, and it's not picked up until later on in their life when they maybe go to university or when they're in the workplace and maybe the HR person wants to have a chat with them about why they're struggling or different things like that. So we mustn't forget that it's actually the BDA is there to support a lot of adults as well. And one of the most common questions from adults is, should I disclose to my employer that they're dyslexic? They worry about the questions. They worry, are they going to be put on a performance plan or something like that if they ask for extra resources or things to be delivered in a separate, different way. And the BDA's got a wonderful CEO, Ellen, who started with us back in October. And she's been really involved with trying to fly that flag for dyslexic individuals and help as many individuals as possible. We try and do lots of webinars. We try and post lots of things on socials because that is the way that people do things now. You're less likely to have a meeting in a town hall and have 100 people turn up and want to listen to what's been said. So like jobs have had to change, the charities and the charity sector has had to change and adapt as well.
Yes, yeah. It's really interesting, isn't it, how to evolve in the current world. And as you say, nobody goes to a town hall anymore.
No, I mean, will be like we do have local association groups that are linked with the British Dyslexia Association, and they are just ran by the most amazing volunteers who create these hubs almost that parents can go to for advice, and a lot of their support is done face to face. Families who get that diagnosis of dyslexia or don't know how to support their child, they need to speak to those parents and individuals that have been through that similar journey to them. So there are a lot of local associations that will run face-to-face training and programs as well. And that's still quite important, even though we have this digital age as well, that there's that opportunity to see someone face-to-face if you want to ask them questions or take part in anything.
Yeah, I must admit, as much as I'm a fiend for researching and reading and doing everything online, mainly via video, I do, when it's really, really important stuff, I do tend to like to go face-to-face with things still.
Yeah, and I think we all realise that as well after going through COVID and teaching lessons online, that human interaction is really, really important. There's only so much body language and emotions that you can pick up from the other side of a camera. And I think you need to have those opportunities face to face, and definitely that blended approach is really important.
Yes, definitely. I think I must admit it's something I thought, hey, online this can be cool, and actually, as you say, the nuances and the looking people directly in the eyes rather than looking at the TV screen, also the TV screen. How old am I? The monitor. And does make a big difference in terms of interactions and when you're learning something. So, how I like to finish the podcast off is I like to ask rapid fire questions near the end of the show. There are 3 rapid fire questions from myself, but they don't need rapid fire answers from yourself. So, shall we dive into question number 1?
Okay, I feel a little bit nervous now, but let's go.
Okay. Question number 1 is, what prejudice have you had about dyslexia that's been proven wrong?
Oh, they can't read. The dyslexic individuals, none of them can read. We have some amazing readers at our school and some really competent readers at our school. And I think what I would say is never underestimate a dyslexic individual. Really find out what their strengths are and what they're good at. And then whatever you ask them to do, play to their strengths, because dyslexic individuals will always have something that they're better at than somebody else, whether it's ideas or creativity or doing things in a different way. Find out what that dyslexic individual's strengths are and don't make any assumptions.
Yes, most definitely. Yes, the assumption thing is really bad. Cool. Okay, rapid fire question number 2. If an alien landed and you had to describe dyslexia to them, how would you do it?
So I would say, gosh, that's quite a hard one. I would say that it's primarily a difficulty in processing information. And that's the way that I would sort of simplify it as much as possible. And that processing of information could be written or it could be verbal. And sometimes when the dyslexic individual receives that information, it gets a little bit jumbled up inside their heads, so that when they have to either repeat back or have an output of that information, it might not always be exactly the way that they've received that information.
Yeah, nice, concise answer. Okay, and rapid fire question number 3. And seeing as this is the Dyslexia Life Hack show, what is your favourite dyslexia life hack? And don't say go to Moon Hall School.
Yeah, signing up to come to Moon Hall. Gosh, my favourite dyslexia life. I mean, we're on the cusp. In fact, we're kind of riding that crest almost of technology, and I think it is transformational for individuals who are dyslexic. I use AI every single day in some form or another, whether it's just asking ChatGPT to rephrase something for me or to make something sound a little bit more professional or whatever it might be. And I think for dyslexic individuals, using assistive technology and artificial intelligence is an absolute game changer. It gives that individual the independence that they need to get on and do tasks without having to ask somebody to read something for them or spell something for them. And I think we really need to embrace that as much as possible as a society to help dyslexic individuals demonstrate exactly what they're capable of.
Yes, most definitely. And it's surprising me as AI becomes more integrated into my emails and my phone. Like, wow, this is cool. I'm unstoppable.
Yeah. Do you know, I read about an AI app that I need to look into, but basically it's like an AI personal assistant, and they go through your emails and put them all into subfolders and get rid of all the ones that you don't need to pay any attention to. And considering I've got about 1,000 unread emails that aren't important emails, they're like Amazon notifications or whatever that have came through that I've just never deleted, I feel like I really need the AI support of a personal assistant at the moment. So I'm definitely a big advocate of anything that helps level that playing field. So I would encourage employers, those that work in education, just to be open-minded about the positives around assistive tech and AI.
Yes, definitely. Well, that just leads me to ask you, is there anything else you'd like to add, and where can people find you?
So I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, so please follow me and find me on LinkedIn. I like to share a lot of my opinions on different things on LinkedIn, whether mostly education-based and not just always about dyslexia. So please follow me on LinkedIn, and you can find out more about Moon Hall School on our website at Moon Hall School Reigate. And if you've got any questions, I'm always happy to answer. And we also like people to come visit our school and see what we're all about. So if anybody wants to come see a dyslexia specialist school in action, then please just get in touch with the school office and we'll happily and warmly invite you to our school.
Excellent. Well, that just leaves me to thank you for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you so much. It's been my absolute pleasure. I'm always happy to talk about dyslexia, and hopefully it's enlightened somebody that needed to find out a little bit more about the wonderful world of dyslexia.
And I want to thank everybody else for taking the time to listen to episode 100. Goodbye for now.